Okay, the recording has started, and this is the April 14th, 2020 Crossplane community meeting. We'll start first, as usual, with a milestone checkup. We just at the end of last week, we did a set of official version releases or minor releases for all the packages that the Crossplane community maintains. So the providers for AWS, GCP, and Azure, and then the sample stacks for them, and then the WordPress app were all updated to the versions shared on the screen here. We're also currently working towards the Crossplane v0.10 release. We normally do those in the middle of the month, which is right around this week here. But after a little bit of discussion, we have a proposal to bump that back about a week or so. There are a bunch of changes in flight that we could talk in more detail about around Ohm and implementing some more of the features there and some of the demos and samples coming together. So the current proposal here that I wanted to share is for feature freeze 1 week from today, so the middle of next week, and then releasing by the end of next week. Phil is updating the roadmap with the given work in progress pull request right below. Thanks for opening that, Phil. And that will capture some of the features that we are planning on including in the 0.10 milestone, which we'll talk in more details about as we go through the rest of the agenda today. Dave, did you have any comments on the packages releases from late last week or on any of the things in 0.10?
Not too much. We'll talk about the kind of reason for releasing those later on when we talk about backup and restore. One difference this time, and it's usually not a huge burden releasing these specific packages. It's more when we do the full release of Crossplane and then the corresponding packages and that sort of thing, that it's more complicated. But one thing that did make it easier this time is that we are moving to using doc.crds.dev for the documentation for CRDs, which will automatically pick up our new versions and provide documentation for them whenever we cut releases. So we've been able to remove some of the basically manual updates on the release branches for providers that was just changing like version numbers and that sort of thing. The tool is still in pretty alpha stages, I'd say. It does run on Crossplane, which is a cool dog food scenario. But if folks are using that and have requirements and features that you want, now's the time to go ahead and open some issues and that sort of thing so we can get that to an even more solid state. So it's a good solution for hosting our docs moving forward.
Yeah, I think there'll be a fair amount of feedback that comes in from, having that be the API documentation, mainline hosting scenario where people, when they want to learn about the types, that's exactly where they go to. That's the only place it's published to. Then that'll be a great way to drive feedback into that experience as well. Phil, any comments on your roadmap update PR or straightforward?
If you just click on the roadmap link, it'll bring up
this one here.
Yep.
Got it.
Then if you just scroll down to 0.9, so you'll see all the stuff that we got done there. Of note, the NoSQL database claims are coming in. So I think Archer, you got the PR open for that. So thanks for adding that. Kubernetes app resources, updates of objects in the remote cluster. And then basically we got like a new, SE Linux style, restrict core API groups for Crossplane Stack Manager. Kind of allows us to lock things down unless you want to open those up. And then basically the ability to, schedule directly to a Kubernetes target in the same namespace so that if you have clusters that need to get populated in there for scheduling those, that's now supported. And as part of the terminology shift, we basically added a package type to the app YAML. So we have like provider stacks, apps, and add-ons now as the official package types there. A ton of work on kind of getting the template stacks hardened up as well as support for private repos and robot account credentials, as well as a huge doc overhaul that Dan led. So thank you for that. And then with 0.10, basically continuing to percolate down the enhanced terminology for provider stacks, apps, and add-ons. We have a V1 Beta 1 quality conformance doc that is in kind of final review right now. That's a really great reference for what it takes to make controllers V1 Beta 1 quality. We added backup restore support. So if you're using tools like Bolero, that you have a clean backup restore with the ability to adopt existing external resources, which is super important. We're looking to add basic versioning and upgrade support for both Crossplane and the stacks, as well as resource composition. And then we've been working on experimental support for Ohm API types in the Crossplane core. And so, Crossplane's, a fairly, broad platform that does a lot of infrastructure management, as well as app and workload scheduling and so forth. And so, adding support for Ohm API types, I think there's maybe like 5 of them, is a really great addition to Crossplane.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for getting this, the roadmap updated here, Phil. We'll take a look at that PR and add feedback. The link to the roadmap update is in the agenda document here. So feel free for folks to weigh in and provide any comments or feedback. All right, let's move ahead then to the community topics section. So the first one on the list here is from Nick, who is not able to attend this time slot that we have normally held this community meeting. So one, as we continue to grow the Crossplane community and, we have more interaction and collaboration with some other communities as well, especially with the Ohm community. In order for Nick to be able to join these meetings, who is driving a lot of initiatives on the Crossplane project, and then be kind of aligned a little bit as well with what my understanding of the time slot or time area that works well for folks with like the Ohm community meetings. Nick's proposal is to move this Crossplane meeting from 9 a.m. Pacific, to which it normally is, to 10:30 a.m. Pacific, to push it back an hour and a half. I don't think we've had a lot, like a ton of traction we can't, go back on at all for this current time slot. I, think that this probably will work, but if anybody has a major, a major issue with that new proposed time slots, to please either speak up now or on the Crossplane PR in which Nick has made this proposal official on 14/21, then you are free to weigh in there with some feedback as well. So I see a lot of folks, I think, from the Ohm community here, like Harry and Artur and Sarah as well too. Would a 10:30 time slot be okay, mostly for you folks as well?
Yeah, I think it actually works because those 2 community meetings are actually bi-weekly. So it's actually, we can have one week for Crossplane, another week for Ohm, and I see it's actually already this case today.
Yeah, for me, it works. There is a conflict with the Dapper community call, but it overlaps in the second part. So in the worst case scenario, I can just join Dapper in the first half when I have something to demo. But most of the time, it should be okay.
Cool. Cool.
Just
thanks.
One comment, Jared. So like for IST, for India Standard Time, like that's creeping on like midnight for them. So I think they had a separate request for like 10 a.m. Might be more amenable. So just I'll drop a comment on that PR.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. We can continue that discussion there then. Cool. Hashdan, do you want to give us an update on some of the awesome TBS episodes recently?
Sure. So last week we had Open Policy Agent on, Torin, who's one of the maintainers and co-founders of the project. It was a really great episode. The projects integrate super well. I think one of the things that we've heard people kind of talking about when using Crossplane is how to do permissioning and how to allow different people in an organization access to provisioning different resources. And OPA fits in perfectly for that. And it's really easy to get up and running alongside Crossplane. So there is some documentation about how you can do that that came out as a result of the show. Also, a few folks in the OPA community are looking at building some tighter integrations. So there should be some more news coming there. If anyone on the call is interested, we're also looking at developing sort of like a cookbook of common OPA policies that you may want to use when deploying Crossplane. And we'll continue to kind of develop that. So if anyone's interested in that, you can ping me directly or just mention it in Slack. And I'd be happy to provide some context around that.
Cool. I see Sarah in the chat asking for a link to the agenda doc. So I will drop that here in the Zoom chat. Yep, there we go. Hopefully that's accessible, Sarah. Let us know if that doesn't work for you.
Dana, I want to ask a question. The OPA provides you with some policy abilities and stuff. What does it benefit besides from RBAC that we already have?
So RBAC is, and we've seen actually some of the architecture of Crossplane kind of designed with this in mind, is based on at the object level. So that's one of the reasons why we had a separation of Kubernetes targets and Kubernetes applications and that sort of thing, to be able to establish control on who can decide what clusters can be provisioned to and that sort of thing. OPA is a lot more granular. So you can write pretty much policies to do basically anything. They have their own policy language. So you can restrict certain fields. Like, for example, in the show we showed, restricting the size of a database that can be created, or restricting the namespaces that can be created in and that sort of thing. So basically it's just more granular control over who can provision what policies. You can also do things like limit the number of certain types of objects. So for instance, just as a kind of contrived example, you could say we only allow 5 databases to exist provisioned from this cluster with size greater than 20 or something like that. So you can also do comparison to objects when evaluating policies. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And that's one of the reasons I think we want to develop sort of a cookbook, because not all of that is apparent right off the bat. So if we had some good examples to show folks, then it'd probably provide some inspiration for writing their own policies.
Yeah, it sounds pretty powerful. Thanks.
Yeah, that was definitely a cool episode, Dan. It's been a very good string of episodes with Linkerd and then OPA, and then was it OpenFast as well? Yep. Cool. I wanted to make sure I didn't say the wrong serverless project, because those do get a little jumbled in my mind. But OpenFast is the best. And then is it this week? Do we get a preview for what the next topic will be, or is that still TBD?
No preview, but I'm fairly certain what it's going to be, and I think it'll be another good one.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll see, and we'll tune in for sure. Cool. And then another little update to share is we had some good work from Marcus, added Crossplane to Operator Hub. So now when you go to Operator Hub and you look in different topics like networking and storage and things like that, Crossplane is now available there as one of the choices to get installed in OpenShift clusters or in other environments that are using Operator Hub to kind of bring a nice ability to provision and manage cloud provider services as an alternative to in-cluster resources that a lot of the Operator Hub stuff runs as normally.
So is this Operator Hub stuff, is it installed on every OpenShift cluster? So all OpenShift users see it on the dashboard?
Yeah, there's kind of two different things here. So operatorhub.io is kind of more the upstream public accessible way. You can use Operator Hub from any Kubernetes cluster, because when you click install, it gives you, a little boop, copy thing, and you can run that with just any kube control prompt. It doesn't matter what the underlying cluster is. And then this packaging format, the OLM, Operator Lifecycle Manager stuff, when you do the packaging work to show up on Operator Hub, then that also helps you natively integrate into the, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a UI and a control, management experience that is on OpenShift clusters specifically, and it uses the same thing between Operator Hub and OpenShift. So, once you integrate with Operator Hub, then you get to be able to basically get included in the native OpenShift UI as well with almost no extra work, I don't think.
Got it.
So both. Sweet. So yeah, thanks to Marcus for that effort there. Just a quick little thing. We're not going to dwell on this for too long, but Kelsey Hightower tweeted about Crossplane yesterday, which got a little discussion going and some good feedback and some more attention to the project as well. So that was kind of cool to see Kelsey tweeting about Crossplane and people starting to talk about it there. So thank you, Kelsey. Dan, do you want to talk about some of the recent Ohm updates and progress there for support of the Ohm spec?
Yeah, for sure. So we have multiple Ohm folks on the call today, so y'all can all feel welcome to weigh in as well, of course. But we have been working on, in parallel, sort of add-ons for both local and remote scenarios for Ohm. So the remote case is where you're using Crossplane to basically provision resources into a remote Kubernetes cluster that was either provisioned by Crossplane or has been configured to be accessible for Crossplane. And the local scenario is where you're creating things in the cluster. So right now, it's mostly just containerized workloads, which get translated to deployments. So that either gets created as a deployment in the local cluster if you've enabled the local add-on, or gets wrapped in a Kubernetes application and deployed to the remote cluster if you're using the remote add-on. We also recently, and I probably should have, oh, it looks like it's already here. We've updated the service tracker app to be compatible with the new spec. And this is actually runnable on Crossplane. We're going to have some more documentation coming for that. But you can deploy this on local or remote if you'd like. So we're seeing a lot of kind of efforts coming together here, and it'll be exciting to see what some of the demos we have coming up will be.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dan, for that update. I think the progress in both, the Ohm community and in general, and then Crossplane implementation of the Ohm spec over the past month or so has been really impressive. So I'm really happy to see all that come together. It's very excited to see those demos as well.
Right. I also want to add a few points. So the first part is that the Alibaba cloud provider for Crossplane almost finished. So I expect we can see a demo maybe in this week. Yeah, this is the first one. Second one is that I'm thinking that we may want to add some more demos or samples for the Ohm support part, like a WordPress application. And maybe we can think about a route chart which is based on Flagger, or we can even do the GitOps demo based on that. So it's basically about, I think we can start to work on the more demos and documentations for the Ohm support on Crossplane, and of course in Crossplane repo. So it will make better for users to understand, okay, how that works in Crossplane. And another thing is that we may want to add a documentation about the data model of Crossplane. I found this is actually today missing from the Crossplane repo. For example, if you check many projects, it will give you the diagram or a few explanations about, okay, what is the data model designed in this project? I feel that we can also add this diagram in Crossplane as well to make people understand better about, okay, how Crossplane use its own, of course, community-driven data model to deploy your applications and your infrastructures in the standard way. So this is 3 points I hope to add. I can also comment this part of things in the release roadmap created by Phil.
Sounds good. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we can definitely work on that. And another point about the next release I want to add, which is not relevant to Ohm, but I still feel very interesting, is a single container Crossplane. I can think of very useful user cases. For example, you can actually deploy Crossplane as a single container in, for example, Microsoft ACI, and then Crossplane can then provision Microsoft Cloud Services as well as a ACI-based application. There's even no Kubernetes in that case. It will be very interesting to see how Crossplane working as a unified or universal control plane in environment where there's even no Kubernetes. So I don't know if that's the goal of the Crossplane, but that is just one point I see from recent discussion.
What is Microsoft ACI?
ACI is actually a serverless container instance from the Microsoft, and actually every cloud has this kind of service like Fargate, like Cloud Run, and for Alibaba Cloud we also have ECI. So all of these services they're not Kubernetes based. So the user interface is a container. So in that case, if you can deploy Crossplane as a single container there, you can have very cool demo to see, okay, wow, you can use Kubernetes style API on the platform, which is even not Kubernetes based.
Yeah, that'd be great. And we do actually have support today for like machine types for VMs that Dan did for like Packet and others. And like we have a experimental version out there for Linode. So yeah, Crossplane is definitely designed to work without Kubernetes in the environment for the target clusters. You can use whatever type of infrastructure you want. So yeah.
Right. Okay. I will try to comment about my ideas on the roadmap part. I already found that PR, so I will follow up on that PR to talk about my thought about what we can do in the next release.
Yeah, I would love your feedback, Harry. So thanks for doing that, and looking forward to working on that with you.
Right.
Yeah, Harry, I like that idea too. Like we had an issue, we opened an issue for that, a similar type of idea where the packaging of Crossplane could be such that it carries it along its own, Kubernetes API server, etcd, whatever it is, to be a minimal control plane. So, but then. So there is an issue with OpenSun that's somewhere, maybe it's in the 500s, we can search for it. But I like the application of that idea that you're expressing for being able to run in container-based environments that the cloud providers support, like Fargate and et cetera. That's an interesting application of that because if Crossplane can bring along everything it needs to be a control plane there, that it could be useful and have valuable features that could be definitely consumed in those environments for containers to consume managed services and have them provisioned and such for them. So I like that idea a lot, actually.
Right. Yeah. I think the timeline is not a problem. If we found it's not ready yet, we can move that to next release. I just brought up this idea, which I think is, I agree, it's really interesting.
Good stuff. Okay, and then the next agenda item here is we get a little update from Muvafik on all the composition work. And Muvafik, do you want to give just a quick little background for other folks on the call that might not be familiar with this scenario and the features that it's enabling?
Yeah. So basically today we have like predefined claims like MySQL instance, Kubernetes cluster claims. With the composition work, what we enable users is that they will create a like the infrastructure definition that they will list the fields, basically like define the claim, their own claim, and then like with the resource class like compositions that will list the resources that they want to bind to that one claim, with inter-resource references and all connection secret and all that stuff. So basically, user will be able to create their own claims via YAML instead of writing Go code, and it will be able to bind to more than one resources as opposed to today. So the main scenarios that we want to enable with that is that, for example, when you have a VPC, VPC setup with minimal stacks or other stuff, in Azure, when you have to create a VNet rule, which has to refer to the MySQL server, but you don't know the name of it unless you provision it beforehand. So in that case, you can actually put them under same composition, referring to each other, and then one claim will create both of them referencing each other. So basically, it's pretty similar. The idea is pretty similar to Terraform modules. but in Crossplane, and also like a few more, you know, actually like a few significant things that will make applications easier, you know, make it easier for applications to bundle the infrastructure for themselves. For example, like in one, like, yeah, like today, application can still like include the claim YAML in the app bundle or like hand chart, but the corresponding stuff is like fully configurable. Like you can bind it to MySQL Server plus VNet rule, or you can just bind it to Cloud SQL and the VPC and the service account, like GCP service account, all three of them, and all that stuff. So that's like the high level of like what composition in general is, and the status is that, so it took a while for us to design it, since it's like a big feature, but like design PR is in a polished state, which Nick has been driving.
Are there plans to merge that one sometime soon, Moafek?
I mean, look, I think Nick will polish it, and like there are a few more features that he will add, like we talked like and agreed, and he will need to add, but I don't know the timeline for him. So, but like we have started implementation, so like we know what it's going to look like. And yeah, in this PR, the definition and controllers right now it's running. Like we are able to generate the CR. Actually, there are like example YAMLs that you can check out and try. So like the generation part is it. So what I'm working on right now is the actual, like, you know, reconciliation of the downstream resources, like the resources in the composition. So I'm hoping in the next community meeting we will have, like, you know, some demo that shows like how this can be done. So that's the
yeah, very cool. I know this has been something that's been a bit of a sticking point for usability and some broader applications of the platform as well. So I'm super excited to see the traction and the progress on this recently as well. So this is great, Moafek. All right, and then so something else I'm super excited about too is that the some of the core developers on the Crossplane platform spent a lot of time recently, like the past week or two, on implementing support for backup and restore scenarios. So to be able to take a Crossplane running cluster that is managing, you know, some external services, cloud provider managed services in maybe AWS or Azure or whatever, and you know, take a complete backup of the control plane and then restore it and have everything come back up and functional, where the external resources are still being managed appropriately. There's not any data loss and all that sort of stuff. So this helps a lot with disaster recovery scenarios. So be able to take, you know, regularly recurring snapshots and backups using something like Valero. And then if the control plane or your Kubernetes instance or whatever it may be dies, then you'd be able to restore that backup and get back up and running and have Crossplane still appropriately managing everything. So for a reliability perspective and operational perspective, that was a huge win, I think, for kind of maturing the platform. So great work to you know, Nick and Moafek and Dan for driving that recently in the last couple of weeks. Is there anything else to add on that topic?
So there's actually, so the implementation changes that we made, they also enable the case where you have the GitHub repo as usual, but like since you don't, you know, you don't store the status, even the cluster itself is gone, you would be able to like still apply from that. Like it was possible, like this was possible before too, but like you can now do this, like, you know, without losing, or like, you know, with actual managed resources there, with no status, or like, you know, basically some assurance about like the IDs and all that stuff. So it's more like, you know, adopting Kubernetes conventions better to enable, like, you know, other scenarios as well.
Yep, good point. And then there is also a one outstanding issue for, in terms of the stack manager and the packages that it can install, like provider AWS or GCP Azure and different stacks and such. The bookkeeping of those installations is functional when a restore is complete from a backup, and all the managed services and external entities, et cetera, will be functional and working. But then there's some of these instances get orphaned, so garbage collection becomes a bit more of a manual process instead of uninstalling a provider and all the resources getting automatically cleaned up. There will be more manual cleanup after that, since some of the references get orphaned during the restore process. So that's still an outstanding issue 1389 that is being tracked, and we'll hopefully be providing a fix for that soon as well. But that's, as far as I know, the only outstanding issue on the backup and restore scenario being fully implemented and reliable. All right, so that was the community section. Then we don't have other agenda items for PRs or technical discussions to get into. So I will open the floor for a few seconds here for if there are any other topics that anybody on the call wants to bring up. All right, if there are not any more topics, then we can go ahead and adjourn for the week here, and we'll see everyone online and then at the other community meetings, like Ohm community meetings as well. So we'll continue collaborating. Sweet.
Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
Drew.
Thanks everybody for joining. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, have a Tuesday.
Good to see
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.